Hello, my name is Eric Nguyen. I'm a member of the Natick Earth Day planning team. I'm here today with Julie Dyer-Wood, Deputy Director at Charles River Watershed Association. Founded in 1965, CRWA is one of the country's oldest watershed organizations, working with government officials and citizen groups from 35 Massachusetts watershed towns, from Hopkinton to Boston, on major cleanup and protection efforts for the Charles River. CRWA strives to protect, restore, and enhance the Charles River and its watershed through science, advocacy, and law. In her role as Deputy Director, Julie works closely with CRWA staff to develop science-based strategies to increase resilience, protect public health, and promote environmental equity as we confront a changing climate. Julie also oversees CRWA's science program, which includes climate change adaptation, blue cities, field science, and education. Prior to this role, Julie ran CRWA's field science program and also served as director of the science program. Before that, Julie was an AmeriCorps volunteer with the Maryland Department of Natural Resources and also worked as program educator for the New England Aquarium. Julie has a bachelor's degree in mathematics from Boston College and a master's in environmental science from UMass Boston. She's the proud mother of Connor and Braden, a fitness enthusiast and marathoner, and can frequently be found running and playing along the Charles with her family. We're excited to have Julie join us for this Natick Earth Day tent talk, which she'll be telling us about the Charles River Climate Compact. Julie, turning it over to you.
Well, thank you, Eric, and thanks to the Natick Earth Day team for inviting me to be a part of this. Sorry we're not getting a chance to speak in person, but this is definitely, given the current situation, this is definitely the best way to go. So thank you for inviting me. Thanks for thinking of CRWA and wanting to hear a little bit more about us. So happy Earth Day, first of all. I love that it's actually become Earth Month, and eventually, of course, it will evolve into just Earth Year all the time. And that's what we're working on. So as Eric mentioned, I am the Deputy Director at Charles River Watershed Association, working to restore the Charles, Earth Day, and every day. CRWA is actually older than Earth Day itself, so we're celebrating 50 years for Earth Day, which is amazing. CRWA was founded 5 years before that in 1965, which does make us one of the oldest watershed associations around today. We have an interdisciplinary staff all working together on an integrated approach. So we have policy experts, science experts, communication experts, a planner, and we all work together to achieve our common goal of restoring the Charles River. We also work closely with our partners in government, EPA Region 1, state agencies, and then very closely with all of our 35 watershed municipalities. And we love working with our municipalities. So again, just a great reason to be part of this event. We have a number of program areas. Our field science program, which Eric referred to, I used to manage. We have our Blue Cities program, which is focused on low impact development and addressing some of the impacts that modern development has on our natural lands and waterways. We do a lot of work in climate change adaptation, and I'll be talking a lot actually today about CRWA's climate change program. And then we have a robust law, advocacy, and policy program. A lot of our advocacy happens on the local and state level, although we do a bit on the federal level as well. So just a little bit about the watershed. The watershed is the land area around the river that drains into the river, essentially our river basin. The river is 80 miles long. Some people don't realize that actually. So another thing, in addition to Earth Day, that we often associate with April is, of course, the Boston Marathon. Like the Charles, the Boston Marathon starts in Hopkinton and ends in Boston. Of course, the marathon route is 26.2 miles, whereas the river takes 80 miles to get there. As you can see, it takes a very meandering and sinuous route, as rivers are known to do. Along those 80 miles, there's 19 dams, most of them a legacy from earlier days when we needed those dams to provide power. The watershed area is 308 square miles, and it includes all or part of 35 different Massachusetts municipalities. Very, as you would imagine, we're one of the most developed watersheds in the state because of where we are. So over 1 million residents. It'll be interesting when we get new census numbers to see what our population is at now. And so CRWA takes a watershed scale view, meaning we look at impacts across the entire 308 square mile watershed, whereas each individual community is usually focused on what happens within their boundaries. So folks that have been around for a long time, or maybe folks that are even new to the area, have probably heard a little bit about the Charles River cleanup story. It is an inspiring story, so it's a good one to highlight on this 50th anniversary of Earth Day. The Charles was really all but left for dead, if you will, some years ago. This is from a quote from 1955. Referring to the river as unlikely to be mistaken for water. So, and these are just some pictures from the 50s and 60s of really how bad it got. People often hear the story of boaters, usually crew racers. That was really, from the universities, that's really the only folks that were in the river in these days. When they fell off into the river, they were advised to get a tetanus shot just from having contact with the water. So it was bad. It was definitely extremely polluted, extremely impacted, and many people just sort of wanted to give up on it, turn their back on the river and move on. However, not our early founders. CRWA was founded by a group of citizens that saw the potential for having a beautiful urban river. And so they got together and founded CRWA in 1965, 5 years later, the first Earth Day. Obviously, the river has benefited immensely from both federal and state big sweeping environmental regulations, such as the Clean Water Act, or in Massachusetts, the Rivers Protection Act. Specific to the Charles, in 1995, our local region of EPA, which is Region 1, launched the Clean Charles Initiative, which was focused on the Charles River specifically, and cleaning up some of the pollution sources that were impacting the river, especially the lower portion of the river in Boston and Cambridge. In 2003, EPA issued the first permit for communities that required them to do some different practices with respect to how they were managing their stormwater. And so that was really important for a watershed like the Charles. Once those big industrial polluters had been addressed, really our main issue was stormwater, just running off from that 308 square miles. And while that is, we're working on that and making some improvements, stormwater is still a big challenge we face today. That permit, the MS4 permit, or the local stormwater permit, was updated more recently and actually does have some more strict requirements for what communities that are part of the Charles River Watershed Association do have to do to help address some of that pollution that is still getting into the river from stormwater runoff. So some of the big milestones, or big parts of the story in the Charles River cleanup effort are around sewage. We have what's called a combined sewer system in the lower part of the river that dumps sewage mixed with stormwater into the Charles River during very heavy rain events. And again, some folks may have heard of this Boston Harbor lawsuit. It did also cover portions of the Charles River. And a lot was done to address some of those wet weather sewer overflows. So we've seen amazing reductions in sewer overflows into the Charles. We have some concerns that with climate change, we may see those starting to go up again. But again, that's why why climate work is such a big part of our work today. And as I said, I'll talk a bit more about that. EPA in their Clean Charles initiative did also work with cities and towns to try and help them address some of the issues we face, really from having very old infrastructure here, where sewage was commonly leaking or discharging directly into the river when it should have actually been going to the wastewater treatment plants. That's where you want your sewage to go, not right into the river. So a lot of effort, a lot of political will, some regulations, some lawsuits, that really meant we saw a drastic reduction in the amount of sewage that was going into the Charles, which is great. Another issue that we have in the Charles River is nutrient pollution. And we've had two, their fancy name is total maximum daily loads, or TMDL studies. I like to think of them as pollution budgets or nutrient budgets. And it's a study that tells you how much nutrients do you have going in, how much should you have to have a healthy river, and then it's a plan to get from up here down to here. So we had two different studies, one for the lower Charles, one for the upper and middle, just because the land uses are fairly different with how urban the lower Charles is. And that study came back with some great recommendations, mostly highlighting the impact of stormwater runoff and how much stormwater runoff contributes to nutrient overloading or nutrient pollution in the river. And so now we are working to incrementally bring those nutrient inputs down to get to that safe level. And a lot of that does get implemented through the stormwater permit called the MS4 permit that I referred to on the previous slide. And so that, again, those MS4 permits are implemented at the community level. So it just shows you how important each of these 35 municipalities' roles is in addressing this work to clean up the Charles with us. So Charles River today, we do face a lot of challenges, but again, I like to start with that story of the cleanup because we came a long way. Why not take it, why not take it all the way? So I've already mentioned stormwater runoff is still a big issue. Anywhere that is paved or built on, when it rains, that rainwater hits that hard surface, runs over it, picks up any pollution that's there, and that flows right directly into a tributary or right into the Charles River. It's not going to any sort of treatment plant. It's really just picking up what's on our streets, sidewalks, parking lots, and carrying it into the river. And it is a big challenge with a 308 square mile watershed that has a lot of built land. So all of that is bringing in pollution when it rains. And then sometimes you just get too much water, flooding issues. We also have low flow issues. Folks may remember the 2016 drought. We got some photos from the South Natick area where there was barely any water coming over the dam. And so we do get hit with both of those flooding issues, too much water and too little water. Nutrient pollution, I mentioned, is a big issue. When it gets into the river, it acts like a fertilizer. So sometimes people hear nutrient and they think, oh, that sounds like a good thing. In this case, it's kind of too much of a good thing. So the nutrients get into the river, it acts like a fertilizer, and it just throws everything off balance. You get overgrowth of, even if they're good plants, you get just too many plants. Usually, unfortunately, you get overgrowth of invasive plants or overgrowth of nuisance plants, or in some cases, overgrowth of cyanobacteria, which isn't a plant, but it does feed on nutrients. And these cyanobacteria bacteria can actually produce toxins that are harmful to human health or harmful to dogs, unfortunately. Typically, it's dogs that'll drink the water and they can have really severe reactions to that. I mentioned combined sewer overflows. That's when the older sewer systems that serve Boston and Cambridge that have both sewer and stormwater runoff in their pipes get overloaded and discharged to the Charles. Unfortunately, we do still have those. The volume and the frequency have been reduced since that Boston Harbor lawsuit, but those do still occur. And as I said, we don't want to see them go back up as we get more heavy rainstorms from climate change. Invasive plants both in the river and throughout the watershed, and then impacts from climate change. So just highlighting that one because that's primarily what I was going to talk about today is CRWA's work to address climate change and specifically how we're working with our municipalities to do that. So a lot of our work has shifted into climate change adaptation. Fortunately, many of the things that we need to do or we can do to adapt to climate change are also going to help us build a healthier river system. So resilience in our communities, resilience in our environment, they really go hand in hand in a lot of ways. So one thing CRWA has that we're really fortunate to have is a very long-term monitoring data set. We have a great group of volunteers working with us for a long time, and so we have 20 plus years of data on hand that we can refer to and help us track long-term trends. We do a lot of on-the-ground restoration work, installing things like rain gardens or encouraging others to install rain gardens, primarily focused on what's generally termed nature-based solutions, where you're using natural solutions or mimicking natural processes to try and restore your natural system. The MVP program is a statewide Massachusetts program started by the Baker administration that helps municipalities do some climate planning and then implement some of their climate priorities. And so it is a program that's focused on municipalities specifically, but CRWA participates as a stakeholder, supports the work of our municipalities, provides feedback, provides input. So we've been excited to work with a lot of our municipalities on that program. It's also a good funding opportunity for municipalities to work on restoration projects with us. We do a little bit of mitigation work, meaning reducing climate pollution, mostly looking at promoting opportunities to use wastewater as a renewable energy source, which it isn't often thought of, but it can be. And then we've also helped with the state level climate planning and some of the implementation there. But one of our primary climate adaptation programs is what we call our Charles River Climate Compact. And the Climate Compact basically brings together all of the communities in the watershed to work on shared challenges and to share information around issues everyone's dealing with for climate adaptation. I put the link up there. We have some more information on our website if folks want to read a bit more. So why did we do this? Why have a climate compact? Well, a lot of the challenges we face are regional. So this is just an example. I mentioned there's 19 dams on the main stem of the Charles. Those are owned and operated by a variety of different partners, some municipal, some state, some public, some private. We also have something called a diversion, which actually takes water from the Charles River and brings it to the Neponset River. If each of these little pieces of the river is managed in a different way, and they're not all coordinated, this is going to impact what we see in the river, both in low flows and high flows. So that's just one example of a reason why we really need to be coordinated in our efforts, understand how upstream actions are impacting downstream communities. And then, of course, in the case of dams, it can be vice versa. A downstream community can certainly impact an upstream community. And then dams is, of course, only one piece of infrastructure if you think of all the different types of infrastructure across the watershed and how they interact with each other. So it's a complicated system. I mentioned the MVP program that the state has launched, which is great, and has really spurred a lot of communities, including Natick. Actually, I think Natick was in the very first round of this program, so it's really spurred a lot of communities to start thinking and planning more for climate, doing some on-the-ground projects, which is great. But that program really focuses on what's going on in the town. And of course, as we all know, there's only so much we can control within our own borders. And then the other big piece of it is regional solutions. And so this is an example from actually back in the 70s, since we're celebrating the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. In 1977, the Army Corps of Engineers spent millions to preserve and protect wetlands as a flood control measure in the watershed. And in this case, it's not one big wetland. It's different tracts of wetlands spread out across 16 different communities, all working together. And it really still makes such an impact today, all working together to improve flood storage throughout the watershed, so that when we get a heavy rain, it doesn't all come down into Boston all at once. It helps dampen that peak, I guess, to use a term we're all hearing a lot lately. And so this is an amazing thing, actually, that was advocated for by Charles River Watershed Association in our earlier days, because the Army Corps had an original plan really to come through and do more of a levee and canal system, all sorts of hardscaped gray infrastructure, and Charles River Watershed Association was able to promote this green infrastructure or nature-based solution opportunity, which the Army Corps did eventually go with. And so now we have this beautiful system of wetlands all across the watershed that, as I say, still really helps today. So what's involved in the Charles River Climate Compact? We have regular meetings of our members as an opportunity to either discuss specific projects or share information. We have online information sharing, a Google Drive with a bunch of resources, a listserv. We do webinars specifically for attendees. Right now, we are working on a joint grant proposal to try and get some funding for the group to work together to develop a watershed flooding model, so that we can understand a little bit better how all those pieces work together, and what kind of flooding impacts we might see from our changing climate. Since, as many folks know, rainfall and an increase in severe rainstorms is expected in our region from climate change. And this slide has a photo of Natick's own Jillian Wilson-Martin, who's one of our great participants in the Climate Compact, and even volunteered to host our first meeting. So I think this photo is actually inside Natick Town Hall. Who's involved? We have right now 20 of our 35 communities participating. So you can see the list there. We just launched in August, so we do hope to continue to grow. Communities are at different points kind of in their own climate planning timeline. So we're happy to have anybody where they are. We did ask that communities have some sort of climate initiative in place before they joined, just so we kind of feel comfortable that they, are in the, in the right mindset to be in the group, and that the group will actually be helpful to them, because we don't really want to waste anyone's time. We know in the municipalities don't have a lot of extra resources. And then shifting gears a little bit, I just wanted to give a plug for how folks can get involved with CRWA. Obviously, the Climate Compact is targeted specifically at our municipal partners and our municipal staff, but we love to engage with our watershed residents as well. Usually we do a ton of that in April. Usually we're all over the watershed talking to people in April. So it's a bit odd this year to not be doing that. But just like everybody else, we're doing our best. So we have started a virtual event lineup. We had one last week, our first one, and it went well, I think, or I hope. I thought it went well. And we have 2 more scheduled next week, April 30th. Longtime past CRWA director Bob Zimmerman is going to talk a little bit about his years of experience working at CRWA and some of the lessons learned in the cleanup he saw firsthand. So please tune into that. And then May 7th, a bit of a training or some recommendations for folks who are citizen activists, good things that people should know about climate resilience. So maybe if you're an activist who's focused a lot on mitigation, but you'd like to learn a little bit more about resilience, maybe you know a lot, but you want to know a little more, this could be good for you. So please check that out. And then the last program I'll mention is our Climate Resilience 101 program, which is really specifically focused on elected and appointed officials in watershed communities. So I've said it a bunch of times just in this short talk that our municipal partners are so important. So many decisions about our local environment get made at the local level, which is great. And so a lot of those decisions are made by volunteer folks. So, if you're a person in one of those positions, either an elected position or you're on the planning board, you're on the board of health, whatever it may be, then this program is for you. It's not a super, super techie program, but really is intended to be news you can use. What should you know about what's to come from climate? What are some tools out there other communities are using to address these? What are the opportunities to work with CRWA? Lessons learned from our projects and from other projects. So our next one, surprise, surprise, will be virtual. If virtual events are working for you, then I would encourage you to check that out. That will also get posted on our website, which is charlesriver.org, once it gets scheduled. All right, so that's all I had, but I'm happy to take questions.
All right, thank you, Julie. That was, I love the river. I've spent a lot of time sort of on the river, around the river. I used to live in Dedham. And, anytime I look at the map of the river, it's always amazing to see the ways in which it snakes around and, just wait a second, like I was just on the river. How is it now? Like, why am I now crossing the river on another bridge? Right. And I think the other thing I just want to mention really quickly too is that, you talked a lot about the different dams, and one of our other tent talks this year is delivered by, a college student who's been doing a lot of research on the South Natick Dam. So I just want to put a plug in for that. And then I think your last virtual event with CRWA was with Reverend Vernon Walker, who is another one of our tent talk speakers as well. So just putting in some plugs for folks who haven't.
Good.
Yeah, who haven't watched those TED Talks yet, to kind of go check those out as well. I think there's a lot of really great synergy with all of our different TED Talks this year. So I guess, I have a couple questions just to follow up. I know, I imagine that working with officials, residents across 35 towns can present challenges. And so I'm just curious about the ways in which you and your organization, work to unite everyone's efforts, keep everyone focused on common goals.
Yeah, I mean, that is one of the biggest challenges we face. We have a staff right now of 11. And so, and obviously, some of those folks are accountants and fundraising people, so our program staff is even smaller. And so, where the watershed is just in one state, there are, just in one country, all the same language, there are, certainly some advantages to that. But in Massachusetts, as folks know, so much happens at the local level. and the culture can be very different just into neighboring communities. The governance structures can be very different. The infrastructure can be very different, not so much on the stormwater side, but of course on the drinking water side, we have a fair number of communities that get their drinking water from the Quabbin Reservoir. Mm-hmm. And then, communities like Natick that get their drinking water from local groundwater supplies. So yeah, it can definitely be a challenge, and trying to, kind of keep up a relationship with each community, when our resources are stretched thin and the municipal resources are stretched thin. So we do try to bring the watershed communities together as much as we can. Obviously, the Climate Compact is, kind of a very mission-focused example of that, and sort of a long-term relationship building that will build on itself over time. In addition to that, though, we do offer trainings. So we've done a fair number of trainings around green infrastructure, different stormwater management practices. We try to get the watershed communities together. A lot of times we'll try and do hands-on demonstrations, and really getting folks who maybe don't always think of themselves as part of a watershed to kind of identify that way. We have a newsletter that's just designed for our municipal partners and staff. It actually, we had to pause it for a while due to resource constraints, but is back up and live. So people should reach out to me if they want to be on that newsletter. And so really that is a lot of what we do. And even when we're commenting on perhaps one small development project in one community, our perspective is to kind of bring in, did you think about what's going on upstream? Did you think about what's going on downstream? So we work, try and work closely with, as I say, all our municipalities, get them together when we can, and really try and get everyone to share that watershed perspective.
Great, thank you. And I think related to that, you had mentioned that 20 of the 35 watershed towns are now, have joined the Climate Compact, and curious to hear a little bit more about what it will take to get to 35 out of 35.
Yeah, good question. So we'll see if we get to 35 out of 35. I will say some communities are really only a very, very, very small amount of land in the Charles watershed, because of course political boundaries and watershed boundaries are not one and the same. So with Natick, where we have about half the community draining to the Charles River, and then the other half of the town drains to the Suasco system, you have a good portion contributing to the Charles. Some communities, they really, even though we count them in our 35, they have a very small land area. So those communities may decide to identify with a different watershed, and work with their neighbors in another watershed, and that's fine. We are looking for the Climate Compact specifically. We are looking for communities to make that community to participate. It's only 4 meetings a year, but still, it's 4 meetings a year. The meetings, they tend to be at 2.5 hours, and of course people have to drive to them and stuff. So the other barrier, I think, for some communities will be just staffing. To have a staff that can have a staff member that can make that kind of commitment can be a challenge. So we're working with communities where they are, trying to reach out one-on-one. When we initially launched this last summer, we really didn't know what kind of response we could get. I have to say, we were just really blown away because so many communities right away, put their hand up and said, yes, we need this. We want to work with our neighbors. We want to learn from our neighbors. We want to do projects together with our neighbors. We want to commiserate sometimes, which is fine. So we were blown away by the response. So we're trying to move forward with our engaged communities, make it useful for them, make it useful for us. And then we'll also still doing some more one-on-one, because the communities that maybe didn't raise their hand right away, that might involve a little bit more of a conversation, maybe talking to a few different people in the community to try and get that up and running. So we've got a few conversations like that going where the communities are definitely interested and, just figuring out kind of when is the right time for them to join. And so hopefully our numbers will only be going up. And yeah, we'll see if we get to 35. If a few of those communities that have a little teeny area, I think we'll still call it a success.
Makes a lot of sense. Thank you for that. I think it's always, you had mentioned, towns have limited resources, right? They're getting pulled in different directions, different priorities, and so on. And I know that different towns are in the process of adding their own sustainability coordinators. We've been lucky enough to have Jillian for some time, but I know neighboring towns like Sherburne just added a sustainability coordinator. And so I think as more and more towns sign on to these different initiatives, there may be opportunities for them to join, something like the Climate Compact as well. So I was going to ask a question about how folks can get involved with CRWA efforts. You did a really great job pointing out a lot of the upcoming virtual opportunities. Could you highlight maybe one way in which, the general public has been able to get involved sort of pre-COVID and hopefully again post-COVID?
Yes, definitely. We certainly hope to be able to return to our in-person volunteer opportunities as soon as it's safe. And we have really with that, we have honestly something for everyone. So as I mentioned, it's charlesriver.org. You can click get involved to see our different volunteer opportunities. Just big picture, we have some citizen science opportunities. So if that's your thing, we have water quality monitoring opportunities. We have invasive plant removal opportunities if getting dirty is your thing, kind of like the on the ground, pull things out by the roots is very satisfying to you, which it is to many people. We have those kind of opportunities. And then we have a somewhat new volunteer program called our River Ambassadors, where we're basically training people to represent CRWA in their own communities. And, that can mean whatever it means, whether it's your own school, your kid's school, some, group you're involved with, your faith community. You can sort of be the ambassador for CRWA, talk about the river, talk about the challenges that the river is facing, and then just give people some information on what they can do for the Charles. In the meantime, either if the virtual events are not your thing, we also have a bunch of different newsletters. So you can also go to our website and check out our newsletters. We have one specifically about volunteer opportunities. So when those, again, hopefully do restart, you get notified if you're on our volunteer list.
Great. Thank you so much, Julie. We're just incredibly grateful for your time. Like I mentioned earlier, just some really great synergy with what you're talking about here and some of the other Tent Talk speakers that we've had as well. And, I think just sharing with us more about, the efforts to, sustain, right, clean up and move forward with our Charles River watershed. I think it's just an incredible resource for all of our communities, for our states. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.